And we are live. Another wisdom podcast here with Steve Ryan. Steve is a managing director at the National Rugby Football League, NRFL. Rugby, it's been under my radar recently. I've been interviewing lots of New Zealand folks, Australian folks, UK folks, and that's their national sport. And it's a beautiful sport. I've watched especially the All Blacks, one of my favorite team. And Steve is bringing the sport to the US, which is super interesting. He's also a member at Love Conquers Violence, a board of director there. And he has an interesting background. He's founded some startups and so forth. So to have a nice conversation today, this podcast brought to you by podpire.com. If you want to start, scale, or be invited to a podcast, or even get sponsors to your podcast, I can help you do that with podpire.com. Steve, welcome to the pod. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your business?
Charles, pleasure to be on your podcast. Greatly appreciate it. To the neighbors down south here in the U.S., just headquartered here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So not just a little further north, we can make it to the border in Canada. But again, appreciate it. My background, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I love building things. I've been a wannabe professional athlete, a girl dad to two beautiful girls and a wonderful wife, first and foremost. And yeah, I went to school as a college athlete, played a couple sports in a little Division III school, became somewhat successful in that. And as everyone kind of transitions into the quote unquote real world, you kind of lean one of two ways. One, you can climb that corporate ladder at a big organization, or two, you can be foolish enough and try to start something or join a group to try to start something. And I took the latter, and it's been quite the ride with some successes, plenty of losses, and excited to where we're at with the National Rugby Football League today.
So my first question is somewhat interesting. How do you compete with football? Then the second thought is coming. You don't necessarily need to compete. Both can somewhat coexist. But yeah, in this life, in this screen, you always compete for someone's attention, and you're kind of competing against the NFL. So the third thought was, target Europeans living in the US and target Australians and New Zealand folks living in the US. How do you see that you're building like the media backend to all of that? What's your go-to-market strategy there?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, we're not competing with the NFL. Like you mentioned earlier, a lot of the other countries like New Zealand, France, England, rugby is their sport, right? One of their sports. It's their contact sport. Where here in the States, it is American football, right? It is the NFL. It is collegiate football. First and foremost, that is America's game. We're really a complement to that, knowing from September through when the confetti lands at the Super Bowl, all eyes in the U.S. is addicted to the NFL, right? That is when the main dish happens. So positioning our league in the offseason, we have a massive fan base that's likes tackle sport. We can provide a supplement media content around rugby, knowing it's played in 120 different countries, knowing it's approaching 900 million followers globally. Just here in the US, mainstream America just isn't aware of the sport of rugby. And that's been our mission, Charles, from day one, is how do you take this beautiful global game and bring it to a fan base here in the U.S. that doesn't know much or anything about the sport. They may know the All Blacks. They know American football came from the sport of rugby. So through media, through entertainment, through content, we can start creating that awareness, because we strongly feel as Americans start to understand the sport, rugby will sell itself, right? The attributes of the sports, we think an American fan base will ultimately love the sport as we do and become successful with what we need to do.
How does one understand the sport? Like, what's the main difference with football?
Well, I would say the big difference is you're not wearing pads, right? You have a mouth guard, and that's essentially it. So it's a blend between, I would say, American football and soccer. A little bit, you're a hockey guy, a little bit of hockey. So you have the free flowing play like you do in hockey or you do in soccer, but yet you have the contact like you do in American football. Some of the big difference or the big objective is really simple. When you break down rugby, you have 15 people on one side, 15 people on the other side. These guys want to go to that end of the field without throwing the ball forward. And then the other 15 are going to try to stop you. Right. So it's essentially that simple. There's nuances like any games that you can get into. There's certain rules or laws within the game that tend to make it a safer game. Right. It very much is a contact sport, but it's not a collision sport based on the rules of the game.
And you have a background in NASCAR, founding multiple companies. How do you feel that's going to help lead the company in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, NASCAR is that one. So I come from Minnesota. I'm not a NASCAR guy. The first race I went to was 25 years ago in Atlanta Motor Speedway. And me being a Midwestern kid going to the first NASCAR race, it really opened my eyes and said, what is this sport? These cars making left-hand turns going 190 miles an hour. It is that one sport, Charles, that I could be standing right next to Jeff Gordon or Earnhardt, literally a minute before they have to go play or they have to go race, right? You tell me any other sport that you can have that much interaction as a fan, as a sponsor with the athletes, because the athletes get it. They know they need the sponsors to help them pay their bills, to help them make those left-hand turns. So you can pull a lot of things from a lot of different sports, NASCAR being one, of how do we create that culture so we can make it inclusive from a fan perspective. To make our athletes that accessible to fans, so fans can truly feel being part of the sport. And that's exciting when you're building something, what we are building from a foundational level. We can create that excitement. We can do what we need to do from a foundational so we can have fans embrace what we're doing. We can go out and get investors that have maybe been locked out of professional sports. We can break down these walls and really make it accessible from the boardroom all the way to the stands.
So basically, I'm reading here, you're using unutilized stadium to actually broadcast rugby games. So when are these stadiums unutilized, and how much of a logistical problem is that? Is that often easy? Because I guessing there's other folks that want to use it. At what times are the games? How do you film the games? Tell me a bit more info about the business itself and what you're trying to build there.
Yeah, so, again, maybe taking a step back, our journey, the founder, Michael Clemens, had an option to buy the Rugby Lions right out of Rugby England, ultimately stepped away from that deal and said, okay, this is a great game, played everywhere, but why isn't it played at the highest level in the most lucrative media entertainment property, that being the United States? So came back here, started bringing people together that have ran NFL teams, ran Major League Baseball teams, been part of media properties, and said, here in the US, we have an untapped athletic pool, right? These are athletes come September, just about 1,000 get cut by the NFL. So can we harness these great athletes and can they come over to the sport of rugby? We have a fan base, which I mentioned before, that's addicted to American football. So can we convert a percentage of those? Can we convert a younger audience that is looking for a new sport to own? And then third, to your point, we have a premium venues more than any other country out there that we can fill content, right? We're not looking at high school venues or third-tier stadiums. These are premium venues, whether it be collegiate football stadiums, whether it be beautiful MLS stadiums, that we can come in and truly give someone a rugby experience, right? So we can go out and find use agreements, right? Lease agreements. We don't need to go build the stadium. Not saying at some point down the road, we will look to do that. We can fill content, right? So even if you're an MLS stadium or your football stadium, you're only housing so many home games. Outside of that, you're looking for content, whether it's Taylor Swift coming through for a weekend, I think, which they would all take, or the Rolling Stones or another musical act. So we can be a sustained content for these venues and bring the fan base. And again, as I said, it's important to us to, when fans come, when they experience our product, they need to experience truly what that rugby experience look like.
Where do you broadcast the content?
Yeah, so our roadmap, again, going back to our mission here, Charles, it's not about throwing 30 guys on the pitch, give them a couple bucks and call ourselves professional or major league. It's how do we take this brand, this sport, to a whole new audience? right? You're probably familiar with maybe Drive to Survive, the Netflix documentary. So me coming from the NASCAR space, NASCAR is America's motorsports, right? Always has been, probably always will be. Formula One, so the rest of the world. Formula One has tried for decades to get into the US relatively unsuccessfully. COVID hit, Drive to Survive on Netflix took place, and we all know the unbelievable success story that it can contribute to. Where now 400,000 people go to Austin, Texas for a race, for a Formula One race. Miami had a couple races. Vegas has a race coming up. So we can follow that similar path. And how do we start bringing these fans in from a media perspective to tell that story of that athlete who was a 5-star at Alabama, maybe played 2 years in the NFL, got dinged, lost a job, his journey into the professional game of rugby to be one of the best players ultimately in the sport. That athlete from, say, New Zealand, or that athlete from South Africa, the professional rugby athlete, his journey into the league, into the NRFL. And the beautiful thing about that is you'll instantly have a country, for instance, of South African rugby fans follow their guys into the league, be a fan of the league or the team that they land on. So part of our mission is we're kickstarting NRFL Studios, which is our film production hub, from a Hollywood film that we're going to be producing to our docu-series to all this other content that will bring in the fan base, all leading up to our matches, right? That will be accessible across multiple platforms.
So I should expect a Drive to Survive-ish series pretty soon, because that was one of my favorite. Breaking Point was pretty goddamn good as well.
Absolutely. And another one I'll throw at you, if you haven't seen it, you should watch it, is Welcome to Wrexham with Ryan
I'll
Reynolds.
check that one.
Check that out.
Welcome to
So
Wrexham.
Ryan Reynolds, Rob McElhenney, Hollywood actors, they went out and bought a fifth tier soccer team in Wrexham.
Okay.
I'm first to admit I'm not a soccer fan, but being in the business, I'll check out. They launched a documentary on FX here in the US, so I watched it. And before you know it, Charles, I wanted to buy a Wrexham jersey, and I was a big fan of what they're doing, right?
Epic.
And now there's articles that Wrexham is America's soccer team. So the power you can harness within great storytelling is unbelievable. And that's, again, one aspect of drawing people in. There's many others, from sports betting and everything, that we need to harness that energy. But that's how you get people interested. And then it's up to us, once they watch that soccer match, or in our case, watch a NRFL rugby match, they go away with wanting more.
Right. I would do it that way too. And I'd probably broadcast my game on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, or something. Is that what you have in mind too?
Yeah, I mean, part of our ecosystem is hey, we're in the creator economy, right? There's more ways to get to an audience, especially an audience that we want, an audience that doesn't know much about the sport of rugby, an audience that's younger. Where's the younger audience going and spending their time, whether it be YouTube, whether it be TikTok, from a social digital generation? So there's a lot of collaboration opportunities that are in the works with what we're doing to make that future fan aware of what we're about.
You're actually giving me ideas there. Like, even, non-professional leagues. Let's say that I start my league, right? It's not that hard. I get a couple of players, whether that's soccer, whether that's MMA and sparring, could like film some kind of documentary out of that and broadcast the game. We now have the technology to do that, and I obviously know how to build a great follower base. So thank you for giving me that idea. Another series that I really like is All or Nothing. Have you seen that one?
Yes, it's great.
So epic,
they have
man.
one on the All Blacks a number of years ago. They did one on the All
The All
Blacks.
Blacks was kind of boring, though. It's like one of the only one I didn't watch. I don't know why. I think it was like different producers, but the football one was so good. I'll watch the All Blacks again. I think the rating was good, so maybe it was just me. On your side, like, what are your goals this year? What are you focusing on?
Yeah, so right now, Charles, if you will, we feel we brought in a good team. Again, people like Bo Jackson, right? Hey, Bo knows rugby. People like Lee Steinberg. If you've seen the movie Jerry Maguire, that movie's based off of him. So a pioneer in the sports agency world, meta world peace, NBA champion, plus an unbelievably successful entrepreneur. So all these people that have been successful in their walks of life. we have the right roadmap. And then the third piece of the puzzle is bringing in the right capital investors, right? You can look at other spring football leagues, other rugby leagues, other startup sports leagues that have come and gone. You know, one of the big catalysts of why they haven't made it is one, being undercapitalized, and then two, also picking the wrong investors, right? So it's critical to us. And we have an opportunity, to be quite frank, when you look at the 153 professional sports teams here in the US, you can line up the ownership group. You know, they relatively look the same, and they're relatively, most of them, billionaires. It is what it is, right? And we're not saying we're the NFL or one of the big five leagues yet, but we have an opportunity to bring in people that have been locked out of buying professional sports, people that are maybe minority owners in other leagues that want to come in and own equity in what we're doing. People of all, men, women, and all different likes to come be part of this. So right now we're in the capital phase and being selective of who we want to join us on this journey.
Is it like referrals? Do you do outreach? How do you reach out to these folks and make sure that they're qualified?
Yeah, a number of different avenues. We have a full digital data room. You know, we get invited to many of the family office conferences to speak at these conferences through our network within the athlete base, right? Starting the way we started our conversation, a lot of athletes now want to own equity. So through our connections of connecting with these athletes, connecting with certain people within Hollywood that want to own equity in professional sports and really own a whole league. So yeah, through our networks. And, you know, the biggest thing is we just don't know everyone in this world. So blessed to, again, come on a podcast like yours, Charles, and kind of spread the gospel to see if anyone's intrigued and interested in what we're doing.
Love it. And where can people find out more about you, Steve?
Yeah, biggest thing, you can go to our website, thenrfl.com. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. As we say, conversations are free. We never know where they're going to land. So always open to have conversations with anyone that feels like they want to learn more or be part of what we're building.
Love it. And I'm Charles Cormier, host of CEOWisdomPodcast.com. If you want to start, scale, be invited to a podcast, that is podbuyer.com.